My name is Matt Cheevers. I'm a growth advisor here at Wenta. I'll just spend a few seconds explaining what we do here at Wenta, and then we'll go into the presentation and I'll offer you some context about the areas that we're going to talk about today. We should be on for just over an hour. I'll try and go through at pace today to give you some time back in your no doubt busy days. Excuse me, and I will also provide my contact details on the chat function so that if you have any questions about today or need some support as you move forward, then you can just drop me a line and we can fix something up in the future. So just a little bit about Wenta before we start, just in case none of you have been on to one of our webinars before or had any support from us. We are a not-for-profit social enterprise and have been in operation for 41 years. The best way to think about a not-for-profit social enterprise is that we operate a little bit like a charity. I must stress we're not a charity, but we don't have shareholders. We don't have a focus on profit. So any money that comes into our business gets repurposed back to help other people. Our core business is that we either own or operate 4 office spaces in Hertfordshire. Those office spaces are let out to a whole range of small and medium-sized businesses. Whether it's just one office or people taking a larger space for a satellite office or teams of up to 20 people. That provides us with a rental income, which is ploughed back into our business. That goes into the business and advice support team, which I am part of. We have 6 business coaches in our business and 4 support staff. And it is our job to help you and many, many others who either want to start a business or have a business, and to help you try and resolve any issues you have, or to set the business up, or to grow the business, depending on where you are in your journey. That support takes the form of 2 different processes. First of all, the webinars like you're on today. So as you found this on your on our website, you can see on our website we have at least 2 webinars every single day across a whole range of different subjects that may or may not be able to help you. The largest amount of time that we spend is providing one-to-one support. So typically I will spend 30 hours a week or so dealing with customers, generally on an ongoing basis. So helping them and mentoring them in their business, helping them with specific concerns, and also providing a bit of direction and accountability for them. So if that's something you think you would benefit from, whether it's from me or someone else, then again, I will provide you with my email address. You can drop me a line or you can call our office and they can book you an appointment with an advisor. If you have any questions that come up during this webinar, please just put them on the chat. I can't see you or hear you. So just put them on the chat and I'll try my best to answer them as we go along. So the learning objectives today, we're going to be talking about customer behavior and customer segmentation today, which is a key element of your marketing plan. So I will make reference to marketing as we go through. And this is probably where I spend about 50% of my time each week, helping small and medium-sized businesses come up with a marketing plan that means that they're not having to think about marketing every single day. They have a plan, they have action points, and they're able to just follow those action points to gain more customers and gain more interest in their business. So we're going to talk about why customers behave in the way they do, talk a bit about customer segmentation, and hopefully give you some tools that you can merge customer segmentation into your business to really think about who your target customers are. So we'll work through these key points over the next hour or so. And as I say again, if you have any questions or you don't think I've covered certain areas, then please just put a comment in the chat and I will try my best to answer your questions or clarify anything that I've said. So we're going to start off with customer behavior. So this is trying to understand us, understand our customers and why people do things and why they act in the way they do. Because if we can understand our potential customers and what their motivations are, why they carry on in certain ways, then that can help us to fine-tune our offering to really touch into what their needs are. This is a fundamental part. This customer behavior and customer segmentation is a fundamental part of putting together a marketing plan. And I am a firm believer that The days of being able to do broad marketing plans where you're targeting a wide range of customers is pretty much over. That's largely been driven by the rising technology, the rise in social media. And I think one of the offshoots of that is, it feels to me and seems to feel to most people, is that the attention span of our potential customers has dwindled rapidly over the last 10 years. So whereas perhaps 10 years ago, we thought it was the behavior of younger people who deemed or seemed to not be able to focus on things and had their phones with them all the time, I think hopefully you'll agree that all of us, in a way, our attention span has dropped, and we don't focus on things as much as we used to, and really working on the proviso that if we don't grab a customer in the first few seconds of our communications, then we'll have probably lost them, especially on social media. So I spend a lot of time focusing on a targeting marketing plan for my customers, and that is a 5-step process that you can see on the screen. So first of all, we go through the process of customer segmentation. So that's about choosing our customers. Secondly, we cover the tone of voice. So this is the manner and the style in which we will talk to our customers. And we need to understand them a little bit more and understand their behavior and some of their choices before we can determine what's the right tone of voice for them. Once we've done that, so once we've come up with who our customer targets are, once we've decided how we're going to communicate and talk to them, we then set about looking at the marketing channels that we think these people will frequent. And that's not just social media channels. There's also a whole host of more traditional marketing channels that may be right for your business. But the key thing here is not thinking about the marketing channel that you like or that you understand. It's thinking, if we know who we're trying to target with our marketing message, then where do they go? What areas do they frequent? And trying to put ourselves right in front of them with the right message to grab their attention. Stage 4 then is looking at the marketing execution and the style of which we do that. And predominantly, in probably 80% of cases, what we do is try and coach in a problem-based marketing execution style. So if we understand who our customers are and what problems we're solving for them, then we can come up with solutions to that and present that in advertising. So a typical advert will have 3 parts to it. The first will outline the problem, and the aim of that is to grab the attention of the customer. The second part will offer our solution, how we can solve that problem for the customer. And the third point will be some form of call to action. So whether that's visiting a website, scanning a QR code, picking up the phone, or emailing someone directly, they are generally the 3 steps that we would encourage for your marketing execution, regardless of the channel you're using. Step number 5, which is the one that's systematically ignored by so many people, is making sure that you have the right tools and tracking in place to measure the effectiveness of your marketing. Because I work with so many companies that once we put a plan in place, they report back to me that marketing has become more effective and they're getting more customers, but they don't generally know where those customers are coming from. So what that leads to is us either still doing marketing that's not effective, or actually just not doing enough of the marketing that is having cut through for our business. So I can happily provide more details on all of these points. Today, we're going to focus our attention on number 1, which is customer segmentation. And I say there's 2 parts to that. One talking about customer behavior, and then I will walk you through the process on how you segment your customer base and choose your target customers. So customer behavior, first of all, there's a definition up there, but it's pretty much obvious. So this is thinking about why people do certain things, trying to think about their needs, their desires, and why they make certain actions, and what factors will influence the actions they make. And as I go through the different types of customer behavior, I think that you may recognize some of the things that you do in this customer behavior mindset, and can probably allocate certain times when you go shopping or buy certain goods, which of the main 4 types of customer behavior you are exhibiting. And again, it's all about understanding this, understanding where we are in the marketplace, and then that will give us a whole suite of tools to be able to tap into those customers, understand them, and then put things in front of them that make sense and help them. So when it comes to customer behavior, there are four types of customer behavior: habitual buying behavior, variety seeking behavior, dissonance reducing buying behavior, and complex buying behavior. And this is often determined by the product or services that's on offer, often determined by the person and their level of involvement in the process. And also where we can certainly come in and do more is what they perceive to be the differences between what's on offer in the marketplace. We'll start off first of all with habitual buying behavior. So this is when people are buying stuff out of habit. The consumer generally has very little involvement in the product or the brand. So they don't think about the choice they're making to service their requirements every single time. They just do it. It becomes routine. So a good example of that is probably our supermarket shopping. If you're anything like me, what you won't do is go to completely different supermarkets every single week. You will generally stick to one or maybe two supermarkets now with the arrival of kind of some lower cost options. And when you go and do your supermarket shopping, then where you go will be habitual. Probably what you buy will be habitual. Unless I'm the most boring man on the planet, which has been an accusation leveled at me many, many times. Yeah, I even find when I go to the supermarket on a weekly basis, 80-90% of what's in my basket or trolley is the same as what I got the previous week. So this is where we're not really thinking about it. We're just going through as a routine. And it's important to recognize whether your business will be operating in this area or not. So obviously this can be very beneficial to the companies that are selling to us because they've done the convincing of the customer and the customer is keeping coming back. But they know as well that there are other choices out there, so they have to do things to keep us coming back. So one example of that would be loyalty cards, where these companies are, especially in the supermarket area, trying to reconvince people all the time that they've made the right choice and give them something back for their continued loyalty and continued shopping. There is a risk with this if a customer feels as though they are being taken advantage of, or it's time for them to recheck their habits and see whether they need to change. Sometimes that can take a lot to get to that stage, but it is a risk that businesses become complacent. And I'm sure we've all got examples of where we've been dealing with a company for a long time and we just kind of think sometimes that they're just taking us for granted a little bit. So that's a big risk if you are operating in this area. The next type of buying behavior is variety seeking behavior. So in this situation, a consumer purchases a different product or service, not because they weren't satisfied or happy with what they bought before, but they just seek variety. So maybe an example in this case is going out to eat in restaurants. If I was to go out on Saturday evening for a meal, I went there, the food was excellent, the service was great, the whole ambiance was really, really good. Then I'm going to be happy. And they've given me a good service and a good range of products. If I then decided to go out again the following Saturday night for a meal, it's probably likely that I wouldn't go back to the same place. Not because there was anything wrong with it, but because I'm seeking variety, I'm seeking something different. And I might leave it a while before I go back to that establishment again. This can be probably one of the most annoying types of consumer behavior because the person on the other end of it, in the case of the restaurant or in the case of you, if your business operates in this area, is continually looking at what they're doing and the service they're providing. And when they don't see customers coming back, they start to change things because they think they need to. And the reality is that they could have done a perfectly good job, but people just want something different and they want a change. So this is where often companies will try and tap into word of mouth and referrals. So if your business is operating in this area, if you know that these customers aren't going to come back because they want variety, then what can you do to try and get them to recommend you to their family and friends so that you smooth out that curve and you don't end up with a business that is built upon peaks and troughs? So this is where getting you to leave reviews, testimonials, all these sorts of things, getting you to refer a friend for a future discount, offering vouchers for returning people. These are all tools that companies in this space use to get people to come back more often, but it is very difficult and often very frustrating. The third is dissonance reducing buying behavior. And this is probably one of those areas where we can do the most to improve our chances of getting that customer. So this is where the consumer is highly involved in the purchase process. It doesn't mean to say that it's an expensive purchase. It just means that the customer cares about it more. It's not a habitual variety-seeking bit of behavior where often it might be throwaway products or there's other choice that they can do. This is where the customer cares. And what they're trying to do is they're going to the marketplace and looking at all the options that are available for them. But the dissonance occurs where they worry that they're going to regret their choice. And this is where I believe companies aren't doing enough to be able to showcase what they do and how they are different from the competition. And in a lot of sectors, it's a bit like sheep, where everyone seems to be doing the same thing over and over again. An example of this, a recent example, so 2 weeks ago, I booked a holiday and I was looking at destinations where I knew where I wanted to go. I started looking at flights and realized that actually where there used to be a difference in terms of low-cost airlines, there doesn't really seem to be that much of a difference anymore. And the whole process for booking flights is based on time and probably in addition, based on how much more the initial price is going to go up once you've decided where you want to sit, whether you want speedy boarding, whether you want a seat or whatever it may be. And the experience on flights is not a pleasant experience for me booking those. The dissonance for me where it occurred in this example was on the hotel side of things. And because we're going to a Mediterranean destination, I just found that all of the hotels just looked and were presented online in the same way. Same picture of the pool, same picture of the restaurant, same picture of the beach nearby and the kind of the views nearby. And it just all looked the same. So I really struggled, and this is bearing in mind I spent nearly 20 years working in the travel industry. You think I'd know better, but I really struggled to make that final decision because for me, it's not just me that's impacted in that, my partner is as well. Yeah. But you don't want to go on holiday and spend a lot of money to get to a hotel and think it's not the right choice. And you would have rather been in the hotel to kind of 2 blocks down. So this is where I think companies here can do much more to really put what we call the features and benefits of their products, services, and business in front of the customer. And I think a lot of companies, especially small companies, miss that opportunity. They're often very good about talking about the features of what they do, but they're often not very good about talking about the benefits of what they do. Is everyone clear on what I mean between features and benefits and what the differences are? I can give another example if anyone's not, and if you just put that on the chat, I'll happily give another basic example of the differences between features and benefits. But it's a very, very important area, and also an area where I feel that dealing with 30 or so small businesses every single week, that people are missing out on the opportunity. So really good at talking about features, not so good of trying to plant in the customer's mind why that feature will be of benefit for them. So there's an opportunity there for you to start doing that and to try and reduce some of this dissonance buying behavior so that people find it easier to make a decision. The fourth one is complex buying behavior. So this is generally when people are buying a kind of one-off product or a high value product. They're highly involved in the purchase process. They do a lot of research before committing to that high value investment. So you could, in some cases, again, use holidays as an example of that, but probably a better example is buying something like a car or a house. You don't do it very often. It's a lot of money. So therefore, the impact on the choice you make is very, very serious. And you will keep on going backwards and forth, looking at different options and checking different options before you make your decision. So I think the first, if you're operating in this area where you're selling high value goods, the first thing is accepting that your customers are in that complex buying behavior mindset. and accepting that this is not just a one-time sale. What I mean by that, they're not going to come to your website once and then just part with their cash straight away. You need to work at this program, at this process. So having a fully defined sales process in place and sales strategy in place, and really thinking that the biggest opportunity here is not to get the customers to just come once and buy, but if they're coming back to your website 7, 8 times, how can you reduce that journey? Because every time they're coming back to you, there is a risk that they could end up going somewhere else, especially if they're doing it online. So how can we look at the process? How can we reduce the amount of time it takes a customer to make a decision and reduce the number of touch points we have in our business with that customer? And often that is providing them with reassurance, bulking up on your credibility so that they believe that, and also doing some work around making sure that you are relatable to that customer and making it easy for them. So a very simple example of that is FAQs, frequently asked questions on websites, where you're taking other things that other customers have asked you in the past and making sure that they are presented on your website to try and relieve this complexity of this buying process. So hopefully, or it might be a mixture of a couple, hopefully with your business and what you're trying to do, then you can see where you fit in with customer behavior in the 4 main types. And of course, there are other factors that influence customer behavior. And some of these are more recent things. Some of them have been around for a long time. So marketing campaigns, first of all, we've all been suckered in, I'm sure, it's not just me, to clever marketing campaigns before where we didn't even realize we needed something. And after watching a marketing campaign, then, you know, it was, I need that thing in my life because if I don't have that, I'm somehow missing out. The kind of whole FOMO approach to marketing. So marketing campaigns can be very effective. Another factor which we've probably felt over the last 3 or 4 years are the economic conditions, and therefore our purchasing power can be affected by what's going on in the country, what's going on with our bills, and therefore we have to make different decisions. So where we may habitually have gone to Marks and Spencer's for our weekly shop, we're now making a decision where we go to Aldi for 80% of what we want and then top that up with Marks and Spencer's or Waitrose, so some of the maybe better types of products. I don't want to cause controversy by suggesting they're better than the others. And I can see that in my behavior. We certainly fall into that camp where 80, 90% of what we buy is generally, if it's me, it's Aldi, yeah. And then you're topping it up, whether it's special occasions or a nice dinner indoors on a Saturday night, you're topping it up with something different because, you know, you're conscious of money, conscious of what you're spending. So economic conditions can affect behavior. And then you've got things like group influence. So heavily linked often to marketing campaigns, but slightly different. So probably the best example that springs to mind for that is what 18 months ago, 2 years ago, was the rise of this prime drink. Do you remember the prime drink campaign, which was effectively what we would call squash in a bottle? Yeah, but it was this brand that was bought out by a couple of influencers and people went mad for it. Not all people, but certainly those younger people that deemed they were in a situation where they must have this prime bottle to show off to their friends and be accepted by their friends. And I read endless stories of parents generally driving halfway up and down the country trying to find their precious little darlings a bottle of prime. And it just shows you how group influence can be very, very powerful. You know, there was even cases of people selling empty bottles of prime on eBay for £10, which astonished me, but then I'm not that target market. And then the irony of it all is because these things don't generally have a long shelf life. When I was in B&M, another favourite shop of mine, yeah, you're getting a picture of my life here at your Aldi B&M, yeah. But, you know, is that now B&M are selling bottles of prime juice for about £1.30, £1.40. So it just shows that people's behavior can be influenced by a group and by marketing campaigns, but generally it has a kind of shelf life, if you excuse the pun. So those factors can really impact, and I think it's important for you before you jump into the marketing planning stage to really think about your customers and what things will influence them. before we start to make decisions on what we need to do. I've covered all these things. So the summary of this bit, I guess, is what I'm trying to say to you is that customers have a choice. So how are you going to get them to choose you? And what are you going to do that's different, especially if your business is struggling to get any traction? Then we can't just keep on doing the same things over and over again. So the key to it is thinking about how you can solve their problems. And problems, you know, some fancy marketeers will call them customer needs, customer pain points, customer desires. For me, I just call them problems, because every time we buy something, we're buying something because it solves a problem. And sometimes that problem can be very obvious. We're hungry, we need to eat now, so we're getting a bit hangry. Yeah. So, you know, we're popping into some kind of convenience store to buy some kind of convenience food because it has to happen now. That's our problem. And problems vary depending on the customers that you choose. What you need to therefore do is try and be different to the rest, which is complicated in some markets where they're very congested. But if you at least don't try and showcase some of your differences, then I believe you will probably fail. And there may be some times where you're offering something that nobody else can. That's kind of a little bit more in the kind of field of Dragon's Den and shows like that, where people have invented something. But it really needs to be that you are fine-tuning your offering and understanding who your customers are and thinking about their problems and giving them proper solutions. You've also got the other point that's on there, which I kind of leave till last because I think it's dangerous. You know, customers have a choice. Why would they choose you? Well, they could choose you because you're cheaper than the rest. And in maybe 10, 15% of occasions, I kind of get it. But what I see of dealing with such a wide portion of small business owners is that often a lot of business owners make themselves the cheapest, not because that is a bona fide commercial strategy, is because they either don't know what else to do, or they think that they'll be able to get their prices up after a certain amount of time, or in many cases, and you may have heard of this before, they are suffering from a little bout of imposter syndrome, where they are doubting the kind of quality of what they do, they're doubting the work that they do, so therefore price lower than they should in order to attain and attract new customers. A couple of points on that. First of all, probably 60, 70% of the people I deal with could put their prices up by 20% and see no negative impacts on their business. And that's difficult sometimes to convince them to do that. But probably most importantly, once you've set your price at a level in order to get new customers, it's a lot more difficult than it sounds to then have a strategy where you can then start to rise that price, yeah, to a level that's going to make you a decent amount of profit. It's easy to think about in principle, but actually quite difficult to do in practice. So we think about the customer, we think about their problems, we think about why they would choose us, and we consider their behavior in the past or our behavior in the past, and we try and use a bit of brain power for this rather than just shove a product out into the marketplace, focus on price, and kind of close our eyes and cross our fingers and hoping that people will come and buy. So stage one, understanding the customer behavior. Stage two then is moving on to customer segmentation and saying, okay, if we can understand who our customers are, then maybe we can make some decisions about what we're going to do. What the majority of small businesses do, in my humble opinion, and maybe my colleagues will back this up or not, is they take the scattergun approach or take the funnel approach. And I do this a lot on webinars and when I'm having conversations with people, and please don't worry, I'm not about to go into a kind of rendition of YMCA, but they take this funnel approach. And what they try and do is talk to as many customers as possible about as many different things that they do. And they present their offering in a kind of like brochure style mentality where they go, here's everything I do, take your pick and let me know which one of these is suitable for you. And expecting the customer to spend their time filtering through all the different options and then still contact you to get a price or to, you know, sign on the dotted line. For me, 10 years ago, probably still worked. For me, it's now more of this. So what you've got to do is be very focused on the target customers that you're looking at, really understand their problems, and your marketing should be about suggesting solutions to individual problems rather than doing this cover-all scattergun approach. So highly targeted, highly focused on the quality of leads, and just playing into how consumers have changed, people have changed, how we engage with things. And as I said before, when I used to sit there 10 years ago with my kids and I'd be berating them for spending 45 minutes trying to choose a film to watch on a Saturday night, and then berating them 5 minutes into the film because they were all on their phones, despite the fact they said they're all still watching. I find myself doing it. I did it last night when we were sitting watching a program. Yeah, watching a program, out comes the iPad. I'm messing around on the iPad at the same time. So we've changed. I'm not saying it's for the better, and I wish I wasn't like that. But it's about making decisions and being different and not doing this scattergun approach to everyone. So customer segmentation is the process by which you kind of divide your customer base based upon common characteristics. So rather than doing the approach where we say, okay, we can appeal to everyone across here, the whole range, what we do is we pick pockets, not literally. We pick pockets of customers where we feel as though we can have the strongest message. And if people outside of those areas want to come and deal with us, we're not going to turn them away. But this is about what we can control. And rather than talking to every single person, we're going to come up with example customers and we're going to focus on their problems, and we're going to target all of our marketing to those people. And people often ask me, well, isn't that just for big businesses? Well, actually, no, I think it's the other way around. I think it's more important for small businesses, because what big businesses have is they have marketing expertise and they have money. And what they're able to do, and still some of them do this, is get away with the scattergun approach, because they've got so much money that they can blanket TV stations, blanket radio stations, blanket newspapers, and they can afford to have people drop by the wayside because they're paying money to talk to people that aren't interested in their products. Whereas you, I'm assuming the majority of you, the fact that you've come onto a free webinar, yeah, or have dealt with Wenta in the past, don't have a bucket load of cash sitting in the corner that you can spend on your marketing. So if we haven't got money to spend, we need to be clever, and we need to be targeted, and we need to be focused. And customer segmentation is the starting point of that, thinking about which customers we want to segment, which customers we want to target, and how we're going to move forward. And the practice of doing that is looking at four main areas of your ideal customer base. So first of all, we have the geographic. Secondly, we have the demographic. Third, we have the psychographic. And fourth, we have the behavioral elements of that customer. So this exercise is looking at everyone you could service and making some decisions on all these points you can see on the slide there about which ones we think are relevant to us. And as with any list like this, that's probably got 25, 30 different options on it. What I would often do is deal with the obvious ones that are not relevant to me and make the obvious decisions. And then maybe there's some thinking time around some of the other factors in there. So first of all, we'll explore geographic a little bit more. So geographic is effectively the where. So you could be in a situation where you could target customers all over the UK, target customers in Europe, the rest of the world, and that's great. But if you try and do all of that at the same time, then you'll lose focus and you'll spread yourselves too thinly. It may be that the service or product that you offer is very tied into a specific geography. So again, that makes this bit easier for you. So you can determine that by country, county, city, region, postcode, whatever it may be. And also within the geographic element, thinking about where your customers are more likely going to be. So if you're looking for more affluent customers, are they going to be in kind of towns and villages outside of major cities? Are they going to be in certain postcodes? And thinking, yes, I can service everyone, but again, I'm looking for pockets within that where I think I'm going to have more traction. Probably the easiest one of the four to decide on, because it will often be determined by what product or service you are trying to offer to customers. So it's about making decisions. That doesn't mean to say that you never, in this situation of selling products to the UK, it doesn't mean to say that you can never sell to Europe or never sell to, countries outside of Europe. It just means there's a focus. So we're going to focus on getting one area in the UK right, or the UK right, first of all. And then once we think we've cornered that, that's when we're going to take the leap and deal with the other issues that are related to cross-border trading. So it's about decisions. The second is demographics. So this is the who. So thinking about, I guess, what people look like in a way. Don't mean look, but what's their what makes up their kind of construction, what makes up who they are. And there's some obvious different factors here: age, gender, ethnicity, income, level of education, religion, what they do for a job. All of these are factors. And it's about making decisions and coming up with those examples again that we think are going to be right for our business. So if I just take one of those, the one at the top, which is about age, you may be sitting here now going, what's this bloke talking about? I haven't got a clue. I think he's wrong. I want to appeal to as many people as possible. And you might say, and many people do on a daily basis, you know, the beauty about my products or my services is I can sell them to someone who's 18 or someone who's 80. And I say, happy days, great. But what marketing message are you going to put out there that's going to appeal at the same level to an 18-year-old as it will to an 80-year-old? Which marketing channel are you going to put that message on where you know that there's going to be a nice mix of 18-year-olds and 80-year-olds? And therein lies the challenge. Because even if you're just looking at social media, you know, and you decide that you're going to go on Facebook, yeah, you might find 80-year-olds on Facebook or certainly 50 plus on Facebook. Are you going to find 18-year-olds on Facebook? All the evidence suggests that you probably won't. If you're trying to target an 18-year-old, as I struggle with all the time with my kids who are in their late teens now, you know, there's no point in sending them something on Facebook. To a degree, it feels as though there's no point in sending them a text or calling them or WhatsApping them because they're not really using those platforms as their primary source of contact. So in my case, 6 months ago, I decided if I can't beat them, I join them, opened up a Snapchat account. And whereas I was waiting 3-4 days to replies to my WhatsApp or text, instant reaction on Snapchat because they seem to live and breathe it every single day. So it's about relevance and about if you're making decisions on who your customers are, it makes it easier, therefore, to find out A, where they're going to go from a marketing point of view, and B, the manner in which you talk to them. And also, if you go back to thinking about what I mentioned before about understanding their problems, the problem for an 18-year-old could be very different to the problem for an 80-year-old, even if the product or service is the same. So it's about making decisions on this, and trying to cut down the number of options and focusing on quality over quantity. Hopefully you're all still with me. The third one is psychographics. So this is a little bit more complex because this is the why. So whereas the demographic is everything on the outside, mainly, and what we do and what we look like, the psychographic is tapping into our mindset. So this is looking at personality traits, the hobbies or the life goals we have, our values, our beliefs, our lifestyle. And again, that's trying to look at your product, look at the problems you're solving and thinking, are there certain types of people in society that will be more reactive to any marketing messages that I would put out there? A good example of that is the whole world around sustainability and net zero or action zero. So there will be some people, if your product is particularly more sustainable or sustainability is a key part of your message, then the targets you need to put in place for your customers need to be people that hold that at an important level. And that's quite a difficult thing to do because I think our view towards sustainability can be determined by different factors. I think if everything was equal, then we'd all be sitting there thinking this is something we need to take very, very seriously. But when we're operating in times where there's economic conditions and economic constraints, then this puts challenge on sustainability and puts challenges on some of our choices. So this is about what's going on in people's minds. So as I was talking to one of my customers the other day, who's a furniture manufacturer here in the UK, I think they should be making more of the fact that their products are built in the UK. because I think we're all used to, and I've got a house half full of it, of stuff being made overseas in a very, very cheap way. But I think people will pay a premium and will be invested in some areas, or certain types of people, if they appreciate that products are being made in the UK, and they can maybe see videos of people making the products, because they become more invested in it. And some people would just prefer, if they could, to buy UK-based products because they feel as though they're helping to bolster this economy rather than someone else's. So it's those sorts of examples that we can tap into depending on the business. The last one is kind of the behavioral element. So this is the how. So this is often involves in looking back at any past interactions you've had with customers. So if you have to make a decision, which I think you should make in terms of customer segmentation, are there some evidence, are there some stats from who you've serviced in the past that help us to spot some of those trends, whether they're based on the type of customers, the way they browse, the way they purchase, the way they spend, how they interact with you and your website. We can often, by looking back, help ourselves to really come up with a plan moving forward of which types of customers that we're going to target. If you haven't got past customers, or they're very few, then the behavior element often gets taken care of with market research and looking at competitors. So if we do a market research in terms of the trends in a particular market, the pain points for certain customers, have a look at the messaging of our competitors or our potential competitors, that will often kind of tap into the behavioral element of how people want to interact, what's important to them as consumers, and how you can tackle that face on. So that one will depend, that approach will depend on whether you've got a business with past customers or not. In terms of if you're selling B2B, so this process is aligned to both B2B and B2C, so business to business or business to consumer. The only difference is if you are selling B2B, then rather than looking at demographics, what you'll be looking at is something called firmographics. So demographics is looking at the characteristics of a person or group of people, whereas firmographics is looking at the characteristics of a business. So you would be looking, if you're selling to other businesses, maybe at the size of them, whether you have a preference, whether you can say, I can sell to any company in any industry, or maybe you could focus on 3 industries first because you have particular confidence that your product or service solves a problem for those industries in a big way. How they perform, so whether you're helping businesses that are on an upward trend, whether you're helping businesses on a downward trend or standing still, maybe what their structure is. So by that I mean generally the legal entity. Are you going after limited companies? Have you got a product that's right for sole traders? Or maybe it's CICs you're trying to target, or charities that you're trying to target, or something in between. So again, looking at all these factors that make businesses different and making some decisions around who you're going to target, and having a stage plan. If you try and do too much at the start, you'll end up just disappearing into a mess of things, to-do lists and tasks, and you'll be spreading yourself so thinly that you won't see any real positive impact for your business. Like with the customer behavior, there's some other elements that impact what we do and need to be considered when we're looking at the segmentation of our customers. So first of all is technographic segmentation. So this is where we have some people, you may be amongst them, I'm certainly not, where technology is very, very important to people. And these are the customers that are the early adopters. So when some new gadget comes out, some new version of an iPhone or another phone, if you remember the pictures, you don't necessarily see them now, but remember the pictures maybe 10 years ago where, you know, if the new iPhone came out, there were people queuing around the corner to buy and get their hands on the latest bit of tech. And I think that's because then maybe the phones were changing quite dramatically and the usability was changing quite dramatically as they moved along, where perhaps now there's not that big jump. But there are some customers who are so into technology, and either it plays a vital part in their lives, or they're like some people that just have drawers full of latest gadgets that they're really excited about when they first come out, but after a while they realize that they're not really meeting any of their needs and they're just a bit kind of flashy and, you know, not really serving any kind of purpose. But technographic segmentation can be very important in some areas. Up next is generational and life stage segmentation. This one particularly annoys me, but I have to put it in, even though it annoys me. I'm fed up when I hear terms like baby boomer, Generation X, millennial, and all these things. It just kind of winds me up a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe because what am I? I'm a Generation X, or as some people refer to me, just a grumpy old man, which I just can't really argue with, to be honest. The reason why I don't like this is because if you remember back to the slide before that had the 4 columns on it and all the factors underneath, there were probably 25, 30 different factors. What they're doing here is trying to group a whole people together just based on one of those factors, which is their age, and obviously aligned to the year they were born. So that assumption that all baby boomers act the same and all Generation X act the same, yeah, I think is a little bit lazy, and it's a bit of a kind of slogan, and I don't really like it. It's a factor, yeah, but you should certainly not just be basing your marketing strategy on one element of age when there, as you can see, so many other factors that you need to consider. So when it comes to customer segmentation, as I said, you'll receive a copy of this presentation and a copy of this video, and I will be more than happy to help you to come up with your customer segments, because we have to remember that we need to be focused on customers and we need to be focused on solving customers' problems. And if we're not clear on what those problems are, then how the hell are we ever going to solve them? We might just do it by accident. So the key then is to explore all these different options, decide which ones are right for you and your business, and come up with something that we call either buyer personas or customer personas. Here is an example on screen now of a relatively detailed one. The template I use is much less detailed than this, but it's always good to start at this point. So effectively what you're doing, which sounds a bit weird, so stick with me, is creating a character. So in this instance, Kate. And what you're trying to think of is that, okay, what are the key challenges for Kate? What's the overview? So talking about her. What's the kind of demographics in terms of who she is? What her values are, so linking through to the psychographic element of this, and thinking about in the bottom box the challenges and pressure points. What I always advise my customers to do is come up with at least 5 of these, because if you're focusing on 2 buyer personas, it's not enough. If you're trying to focus on 10 at any one time, it's too many. And you will have 5 buyer personas lined up. And every time you do a piece of marketing, regardless of the channel, if you are not clear on which 1 or 2 or 3 of your buyer personas that piece of marketing is trying to talk to, then you don't do it. Everything needs to be focused around saying, okay, today I'm going to do a bit of marketing focused on Kate. Where does Kate go? What are the marketing channels I'm going to use to get in front of Kate and convince her that I can solve her problems? And if you can't see that, and if you don't know who you're doing, then I would suggest that probably what you're doing is going back to the coverall approach, brochure style marketing, where you're sticking out everything you can do and you're saying to the customer, take your pick. Now, think about you as a consumer and think about how you react to that and whether you do engage with that. I would argue that the majority of you will be like me, where if something doesn't grab you straight away, then you're turned off from it, whether that's a leaflet through the door or something on social media. So all of this is trying to tackle what are the 2 key cornerstones of being good at marketing and good at sales. And marketing and sales are very different things, which is a whole nother conversation, which I would happily have with you on a one-to-one basis. But the 2 things certainly with sales and a bit with marketing that you need to tick the box of are, first of all, credibility. Does the potential customer think you are credible? Do you have the experience, the qualifications, the reviews, the know-how to do what you say you're going to do? And secondly is relatability. And this is where this really comes in. If you're presenting, if you've done some time to understand your customers and you're presenting the problems of those customers or a problem of those customers in some marketing, I think the chances that you become relatable go up massively. Because if I see marketing messages that I feel as though are related to me, then I'm going to act. If I feel as though it's too generic, too coverall, then I'm not going to feel as though that marketing is talking to me. So the most effective marketing for me now is problem-based marketing, where you're trying to say to the customer, excuse me, I understand you. I understand what your problems are, and I've got a solution for, in this case, one of your problems. So when you go through this buyer persona work and you come up with a list of maybe 10, 15 different problems that customer has, the great news with that is that when you come to execute your marketing and you're sitting there with a blank sheet of paper thinking, what do I put today? The problems that you have become the first part of your message. The solutions you have for those problems become the second part of your message. So effectively, by going through this process, if you have 5 buyer personas and each of them you've identified has 8 different problems, then you've just created the copy for 40 pieces of marketing that can go out for your business across a range of different platforms. Sometimes when we put 5 buyer personas in place, sometimes we get it wrong. So having more, so if you sat there and come up with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different buyer personas, that's really good. We'll focus at 5 in any one time. But then if one's not working and we're not getting it right, then maybe we'll get rid of number 3 and introduce number 6. You know, it's not a perfect science. If I could do something and walk you through this process and guarantee you success first time, then I probably wouldn't be sitting in an office in Stevenage talking to you now. I'd probably be sitting on some yacht somewhere because I'd be very rich and famous. But coming up with your buyer persona is so important as the first step of coming up with a marketing plan. So just to recap in terms of the benefits of this, went too far, sorry. Number one, I think it's going to be more efficient spending, and that spending is not just about money, but that's also about time. I firmly believe that by having the process of customer segmentation and buyer personas, that you will end up getting higher quality leads. So you won't get a lot of traffic coming through to your website. Well, when they actually look at what you do, they realize it's not for them, which can be very, very frustrating. I think as well, once you kind of narrow down on your customers and looking at their behavior and what they need and doing your market research, I think it might identify some new niche markets for you where you can tap into specific problems with your specific solutions. So I think that could be beneficial as well. I think just by understanding customers, it kind of makes sense to me that if you understand people in your life, let alone customers, then there is a greater chance of you retaining that customer and not having to keep on going out there and buying new customers over and over again. And, you know, I wish I could say that 80, 90% of small businesses are doing what I'm suggesting here. I do my best to convince the 30 or so I deal with a week that this is the right way to go forward, and I passionately believe it. But if you are one of the ones that do embrace it, then it gives you a great opportunity to differentiate your brand, differentiate your marketing, and truly show to those customers that you understand them, get what their problems are, and you can service that problem in some way. So this is all about more focus. This is all about doing something differently, and it really plays into the fact and the comment that I use on a lot of my presentations, because it is incredibly valid with small business owners and people, full stop, is the quote or the definition from Albert Einstein that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And unfortunately, so many small business owners fall into that category where they just keep on going in the same way and can't understand why their business is not growing and not succeeding. Hopefully that was some of use to you. Hopefully some of you at least are still listening. That would be great. I'm going to put my email address on the chat bar now, if I can type and talk at the same time. Can't do that. I've had to stop talking, making mistakes. Please feel free to send me an email to ask me any questions. If you want to book a one-to-one, I can direct you to the office, or I can book it straight into my diary. But thanks for attending today. Hopefully it was of some use to you, and I look forward to seeing some of you again in the future. Thank you very much.